Hi, everyone. I'm Manarasi, and I'm a member of the PPLI. Tonight, we're going to be exploring the topic barriers impacting female underrepresentation in commercial aviation and their interventions. So, tonight we have 5 speakers from 5 different industries within aviation who are going to help us explore their experiences with barriers that they've come across and what they've done to overcome, what resources they've used, and hopefully have some helpful hints for you if you are just getting into the industry or continuing along your path. So I will put some information in the chat regarding a literature review that inspired this topic, as well as some information about the Professional Pilot Leadership Initiative, if anyone is interested in joining. But to start us off, we're going to start with Meenal Paul. She is a CFI and CFII, and she also has some experience as a flight attendant. So she brings a really unique perspective. And yeah, join me in welcoming Meenal to the platform.
Hey everybody, I'm Meenal and I am a CFI and CFII here in New Jersey. And as we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I didn't always and thought that I was going to end up as a pilot. I was a science major, and when I decided to go into aviation, being a pilot was never really offered as a choice for women in aviation. And I was told, like, hey, if you like flying so much, you should just become a flight attendant and you can travel the world, which is a great career. I did enjoy my time as a flight attendant, very, very much so. But it wasn't until I met a female captain and first officer together, and it was my first time I had seen female pilots, period. And they were both working together. And I was talking to them and I told them how much I enjoyed flying and how much I loved my experience. And they really simply asked, why don't you just become a pilot? Which nobody had asked me at that point until then. But the captain, she was also a DPE. So she offered to take me on a tour to this airport where she was going to be conducting a check ride. And when I showed up there, she bought me my discovery flight. And so today I'll be talking about that importance of mentorship and then turning back and providing that mentorship to people behind you and the barriers, how we can overcome those barriers in that way. So I think like a couple of the barriers that I faced as a pilot myself were just getting started. So I talked about how being a pilot is not really a career choice that's really readily offered out there, especially from someone who comes from my immigrant background. Usually the career choices offered are like doctor, engineer, lawyer, and those are the successful careers. So being a pilot is always off track. And it's not until you actually meet pilots that you realize, hey, wait, this is actually really achievable and I can do this. And being a CFI, I like closely see where we're losing student pilots, because as we were just talking about it before this webinar started, we have seen a rise in the number of student pilots, and I see that too. There's a huge amount of student pilots that are women, but we are unable to retain them until the commercial level. And I have a couple of thoughts of why I think that the barriers lie in that area. I do think there's a lack of community. When women go into flight schools, or at least according to my experience, it still does seem like a boys' club in a way, and it's hard to find your community, people you talk to, and that's why like places like the PPLI, which I'm also a member of the PPLI, the Professional Pilot Leadership Initiative, these are so important. The 99s is so important because this community is the way we can retain pilots. I also think like there are other things like family planning, thriving, money. Those are issues that all relate to retaining women pilots. However, I do think like even as for myself, like I was pulled into the aviation world by other women. And when I pull other women with me, it kind of creates like this conga line of pilots, which it keeps pushing you forward as well. So the idea of like getting mentored and turning around and mentoring somebody else is a way where I think we can overcome this barrier, because we can all just kind of keep propelling each other forward. And mentees are just as important to mentors as it is the other way around. There are, like I still have had those feelings of being an outsider, of having imposter syndrome, and I don't really think they go away. So I think like being in a community like the 99s, we can kind of see each other and kind of like celebrate each other's wins. and especially like when we already have this kind of group, it's important to see where our blind spots are. And in turn, talking to the new generation of pilots, which looks very different from the type of pilots that have existed even like pre mid 2000s, where they're like flying has become exponentially more expensive and more inaccessible. So I think there's something to be said of kind of coming into terms with what type of diversity exists in groups like 99s or the PPLI, where are we taking a look at what is the economic structure of this group? Are we seeing more women of color? Are we seeing women that are younger? And I think that that's something we have to look into ourselves, is are we creating a diverse community, even inside the community that we have created for women pilots? And I think that that starts with us being a little bit more open-minded to talking to people that we wouldn't necessarily think of, and kind of getting their input, talking about how we can make changes. And we have to be open to critique, even in a group that is trying to create more diversity. In my school, so because I had experienced the lack of community really deeply, this is my little attempt of kind of like overcoming that. I created a group chat of all the female pilots that are students at our school. And it's a way that we can all keep in touch, like without having to have monthly meetups or hangouts, where we can celebrate each other's wins. Like, hey, this person's solo today, everybody congrats them. Or, this person went on their first cross country. So I think that that has been a great new thing that I've been working on. So I'm very happy with that. But those are a couple of my thoughts on the barriers I have seen as an instructor and kind of ideas on how to overcome them. But that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Mina. That's really impressive. You have kind of your internal organization of connecting you to all the female pilots that you meet. And obviously right now we're in a 99s webinar with this much larger international organization. So thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. Next up, we're going to hear from Shelby King. She's a corporate pilot, and so she brings a very different side of the field, side of the industry into play. Shelby?
Hello, hi. Thanks for putting this together. I'm glad to be speaking on this. So just a brief introduction about myself. I was first exposed to aviation around 12 years old. I had a teacher in middle school that offered an after-school class. I signed up for it and just stayed with it through the end. And the last lesson was a flight. And from there, I was hooked. I stayed in contact with him, and we continued to fly throughout high school. My senior year, I got my private pilot's license. And I did my research and went to an aviation college, which was Embry-Riddle in Arizona. Through Embry-Riddle, I think I really found a good community with women in aviation in our local chapter. There were student pilot meetup groups. And then just as the female population in general wasn't that large, we tended to be pretty tight and connect with each other, which I think helped me get involved. It helped me put myself out there. And also if I had a question, I didn't feel afraid to ask anyone. I did flight instruction for a year after graduation, and then I got hired with a 135 charter operator flying a Global Express. So it's a Bombardier product, but the first year was amazing. I flew all over the world. I stayed with the company for 7 years, and it was a whirlwind of an experience. Asia, China, Russia, 3 crew trips. The longest flight I did was LA to Russia, LA to Turkey. And then in July, I got a new job with a 91 operator here in Dallas. So I'm just flying executives around. But what I've noticed so far as barriers for me, and I was reading the literature review, which I find very helpful in the chat, is the term tokenism. And that's something that I hadn't heard in a while. And that is, recruiting a small number of people from underrepresented groups in order to give the appearance of sexual or racial equality within a workforce. And something that I experienced was someone very close to me when I first got my job within the first year said, oh, well, you only got that job because you're a woman. And that really hit home because I thought this person was a friend, and they were a friend. But how do you overcome that? And it wasn't just one person saying it. I'm sure everyone's been exposed to, oh, you got that because you're a female, or you won that scholarship, must be nice getting free money because you're a woman. So it kind of took some time for me to figure out, okay, don't take it too seriously. And what I found helpful was to come up with a list of achievements for me. So I was like, I've achieved this rating, these awards, I've won this scholarship. I got this through my university, or I was recognized this with my company, and even feedback from my peers when we were flying. I just kind of made a note of it. And then I started comparing that with colleagues. I would ask, hey, when did you do this? Or what ratings do you have? What extra groups are you involved in? And even looking at former classmates. And that's when I started to realize that, no, I'm very well qualified. I'm very capable, and I have all the same experience as my male counterparts. So that really helped validate me to realize that's just an opinion, and it's going to take a while to get over that, the stigma or that, and people are never going to get over it. But seeing it in a list format of everything you've achieved and accomplished, I found was very validating. And in fact, I feel like a lot of us as women work harder and are more involved. First off, because we're passionate about it, but just because we almost have to. In order to advance, sometimes we have to do more than our counterparts. The second part that I noticed, and this was later on as I upgraded to captain within the corporate world, is the optics. And this, I hope, changes as we get more females in aviation. But even in corporate aviation, having a female captain or female pilot is very rare. Usually there's one or two within a department. My company that I worked at was they were very opportunistic. So they hired the person, not necessarily the experience. But I've had experiences where I was moved off trips because I was either too young, or the visuals, a young female being a captain on an international trip, they would move me off. A client, I flew with them one time, and then the next return trip, it was a crew swap. I wasn't on the trip anymore. And they don't really give a reason. They said, oh, logistics or crewing, but it was, kind of unsaid that they didn't want me, in whatever opinion that was. So again, how do you overcome that? Because it's nothing that I personally can change. That's your opinion, that's your view. I've had passengers that have doubted me just on meeting me. They either say, oh, are you old enough to fly this plane? Which I'm sure a lot of the airline pilots get. Or I've had, hey, I hope there's another pilot out there. And that was my favorite, because I said, yeah, there is. And we go out and he's younger than me and looks younger than me. And at the end of the flight, the guy was very polite and said, thank you, that was such a good flight. So that's where I fall back on my capability, my training. I was hired for a reason. I successfully complete training. I get good feedback. So just being able to not take it personally and realize people have these opinions on visuals, and just do your job, show up. I do a safe, efficient flight, and that's really all I can do. If it doesn't change their opinion, if they call the company and would like a different pilot on the next trip, it is what it is. I was able to provide the job and do it safely. But a big part of what has helped, even with the optics, is training. So we use CAE or flight safety once or twice a year, depending on how often your company sends you. And what I've noticed is there was a couple, in the last few years, the attitude of the instructors has shifted. It was when I first was hired, oh, we have, one female in a class of 10, 15. Usually there's only one of us in the class for training. And you're almost under a microscope. They're watching your V1 cuts. They're watching everything you do to just see, are you doing it correctly? How do you handle stress? Some of the instructors will throw an emergency at you that wasn't briefed, that your sim partner didn't get. And then when you handle it well, they're like, oh, you did so good. That was great. And when you don't, what I found is I just say, hey, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared. Or how can you help me improve on that? And in the last couple of years, I've noticed them say, oh, wow, we have a lot of females coming through and they're just as competent. They're just as capable. And if not, they can handle situations better than some of the male pilots. And that's pretty much been one out of each instructor of the last 3 years that I've had that has complimented me and complimented someone else in the class before me by saying, wow, she did such a good job. I'm looking forward to working with you. And so that also validates me as a pilot and within my company, saying, yeah, okay, maybe someone has this opinion of, you're a young female, especially in corporate, when you're flying, passengers are typically business people, wealthy people, older. but I'm validated because I know I do the training, I get compliments, I get good feedback from my instructors and my peers. And that's really all I can focus on. I can't change everyone's opinions, but I can just focus on myself and good decision making, being having good CRM with my crew, and really just being able to move forward from there and enjoy the trips and make the most of it. And that's all I really have. I found the article very helpful, and I found the good community, having a supportive network was really helpful. And I don't know, the 99s are a big part of why I've progressed so far in my career. And I'm in the final phase of the PPLI program, and I'm hoping to just stay involved and do more.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelby. It's definitely difficult when you are getting all of this stigma or these stereotypes put on you when you're just wanting to be perceived as an individual, because you put in the work yourself. You want to be viewed by your actions, and to be viewed by all these stereotypes, it is definitely a challenge. Next up, we have two speakers who are going to be working together. This is Antonia Kopi and Elisa McGee. They bring some really interesting perspective. Antonia has flown overseas and has all kinds of equality representation experience, presenting in front of groups, and Elisa is in the military. So these are two speakers who bring even more diverse background. Are you guys able to share your screen?
Hello, I'm Elisa. I'm going to share my screen now. Share. And we'll go here. Okay, hope you can see that.
Yes.
All right, I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Lisa McGee. I'm a C-130 pilot in the Air Force. I went to Embry-Riddle after getting my private pilot's license when I was 18, and I started flying because of the influence of my granddad. Flew gliders at 14 with him, and then became obsessed and went to every air show possible. So I flew with the Air Force, doing missions all over the world for humanitarian effort, exercises with foreign nations for foreign partner building. We did 3 combat deployments, including in Afghanistan, where I want to note that my 99s chapter sent me a gift in the mail when I was deployed in Afghanistan, and it meant so much to me that I still have the card that they sent and the little airplane lapel pin. I put it in my flight jacket. So the support of the 99s has always been with me. And now I am a researcher in seismoacoustics. That's it about me. And Antonia?
Yeah, hi, my name is Antonia. I have 22 years experience in aviation, 18 years on complex aircraft as Learjet 60 and Dash 8Q400. I'm from Switzerland, and I spent 15 years in Western Africa, during which I lived through 2 wars. I have a 10-year-old boy, and I flew until my 5th month of pregnancy. When I resumed flying after his birth, I was still breastfeeding him. The last 3 years, I was ground instructor and academic supervisor for a French aviation university in the ETPL department. And I'm actually in China, where I'm looking forward to raise my skills and in human interaction and conflict resolution. So let's start with the barriers. So the biggest barrier is not the men who prevent women from entering in the aviation industry, but the women who don't enter because on the way they see it. And for me, it's very important to understand how the brain it works. That's why I wanted to share with you that the cognitive biases that will influence our choices, particularly with dealing with a complex amount of information, and time is limited. If you hear all your life that men are good in conflict resolution, decision making, stress management, and that women are good in listening and career for others, when you make a choice of career, that your brain will take a shortcut and it will influence you. So you are already in the in the aviation industry. However, the cognitive biases can influence your choices and influence your career too. Maybe you will step away from some place and you wanted to be. So just be aware that it could influence you. It's already the most important step for me. Then the stereotype traits, refers to the risk of confirming a negative stereotypes. So let's take, for example, a classroom of 11, 12 years old student, and you separate the classroom in two groups. So you have one group, then you will tell them to reproduce a very complex draw, but you tell them it will be a draw game. And the second group, you tell them it will be a geometry test, and boys are better than girls in math test. So as you can imagine, the result on the first group, with the girls will have a better result and better performance than in the second group, but they will be also better than boys in the first group. And what is interesting, if you say it's a draw game, that the boys will have a lower performance in the first group that they did in the second group. So this is a stereotype trait. And finally, what is very important for me and for you to understand that the brain has no sex. Our brain are all the same. So it's the social stereotype that make you think differently, like this Venus or Mars thing. So if a girl grows up in a family for whom logic, spatial displacement, map reading, etc., it's important for them. So it will be a strong point at school. And if a boy grows up in a family where literature is important, it will find it easier in these subjects. So, and nothing is final. Our brain is elastic, so you can always learn new things. You can perform in the wide range and complex skills. So for me as parents, it's very important to say that we are responsibility, and our responsibility is to speak up. It's not just a question to telling our girls that they can do anything. It's also educating our boys that by showing them that there is no difference. So for me, what is very important, like after my academic years, is like inclusive language and writing are the key to stop stereotypes. So what is your experience, Elisa?
Oh, well, I'd agree with that. The parents' role in breaking some of those gender norms was something I'm really grateful for, because I had the full support of my mom when I did things like played on the ice hockey team with all men. That's something I did in high school, and she didn't question it or say, "What are you, a boy?" And I think I've had a lot of hobbies that are dominated by men just by chance, but I also love more traditional things like baking and working on my makeup. So my mom always supported me. I'm very lucky that I had parents like that. And that brings me to my slide about visibility. So being on the ice hockey team in high school and being the only female made it really easy for me to transition into a career. Even going to Embry-Riddle was like 90% male. I think it's pretty much still close to that today. But I was very comfortable just being different because I think I'd practiced doing what I like to do, which happened to be with a lot of guys. So when I went to pilot training, this is a picture of my pilot training class, and this is Mustache March, which is an annual tradition, and me being the only female in the class, I just went along with it and thought it would be funny if I wore a mustache too. So it's not about fitting in, it's just about making light of the situation of like, this is hilarious. I'm the only woman. So in this class, I happen to be the leader of the class, in addition to being the only woman. And that was something that I continued to do because at times I was forced into that position just by who is the senior ranking person here, and that would be me. So I was forced into it into leadership roles, and that became also normal for me. So I want to emphasize that a barrier could be that if we want to be involved, we should consider the roles that we volunteer for and make sure that when we think about our strengths, for example, for my strengths are organization, communication, getting to know people and caring about them, that we're not pigeonholed into something like, oh, well, you'd be really great at organizing this event, rather than those are leadership strengths. How about you go into this leadership position? So recognizing the differences and being careful about what we volunteer to do, and the role that we should be volunteering for is the leadership role. And just challenge yourself. Claim your achievements, as was said before. I completely agree with that. I want to note that it's more likely that your achievements are not being emphasized just because of a lack of contact with the other guys in the organization. Because of their social relationships, what you've accomplished may not be heard over and over. So be intentional about maybe once per month or once per quarter, meeting with the person that supervises you so that they know that list of accomplishments, and claim your achievements. Learn how to introduce yourself and be proud of what you've accomplished, and practice talking to your boss about that, so that they also know what your goals are. And I think feedback, just like the word mentor, is a little scary to some people. So instead of asking for feedback, reiterate your goals, say what you've accomplished, and then ask them for advice about how to move forward. My second point is about being heard in communication. There's a way that I talk in my social circles with women, or even on this Zoom, I'm just being who I am. It's not the same voice that I use when I'm talking to 50 people or my crew of 10, or this small group of people in the picture who were from multiple nations. We were coordinating our mission that day. And so learning to use your voice, speaking from your diaphragm versus your throat versus your mouth, and voice projection and awareness can really help you when you're the only female there. We tend to have higher frequency tones. So a lower tone is generally easier to project across a large space, and it might be necessary to get your point across. Speaking up in daily life is something I think you can practice it every day with anyone in your friendship circles, or at work, or just at in your running errands. If you see something that you need to speak up about, practice speaking up even in the smallest instances. And that way, if something inappropriate happens in the cockpit or in the planning room, you'll be well practiced at exactly what phrase to say if you see or if you observe something inappropriate. A phrase that I like to use that doesn't shut down the crew when I'm the aircraft commander is, "That's inappropriate." And it rolls off of my tongue, and then I continue on with the work that we need to do. And you might find your own phrase that sounds like your voice, but practicing that will allow you to tell people how you and your crew will be treated. So stand up for yourself. And last, get to know your crew members, the people that you work with at the FBO or anywhere you go. Just getting to know people so that they, I think a lot of times my skills in getting to know people were cultivated by the need to diffuse the nervousness of someone else around me. Like, oh, you're a girl, I don't know how to talk to you. So I would learn how to talk to even people who are nervous around me. It's just an adaptation skill. So that's all I have. And this is for Antonia.
Thank you, Elisa. I like the thing that with the little sentence like, oh, maybe it reached their brain and stop and start to think about it. Maybe I was too far. So yes, when I became a captain, I was aware that my voice was soft. Honestly, it's also linked with self-confidence. So I quickly treat myself to a course with an actor to work on my voice, in particular to make my voice low pitch when I raise it. Because a man favorites a response to a powerful woman who raises her voice is to tell her she is hysterical. So we are not, it's just that our voice are higher. So for my last point is as simple as being yourself. So I really love these pictures with Lydie, who is, I mean, so feminine, or what we stereotypically call feminine. She's always wearing makeup and jewelry, and it's just give me another pictures of pilot. So when I joined my first company at the age of 24, I'd love to have role models, because the only woman I saw in the book, well, even I didn't see a woman like flying, but just in the book, it was, they looked like men. They had to fight so hard to make a place for themselves that they had to stick on their codes. And I really knew who I wanted to look like when I became a captain. And it was just the person I saw in the mirror. So your brain needs all its capacity to perform in this job. So don't take away some of its resources by playing as someone else. Of course, in my first company, I was the only woman in the business aviation company. A year of negotiating with the chief pilot to hire a woman. I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform well, and not to break the image of the woman. I was thinking, if I'm doing bad, maybe they will not hire a woman anymore. So, and when I was pregnant, I stopped flying at the 5th month instead of the 6th, just for the same reason. So don't carry, my advice, don't carry this mental load. It's useless first, and it's too much for one person. Inspire the woman around you. And I like what a 99 said. We saw this phrase all the time on the PPLI. So don't underestimate the inspiration that you can have around you. That was for me. Thank you.
Thank you, you too. That was wonderful. You had some great points. And Elisa, let me just say, you definitely had the best mustache out of everyone in that group. So something to be proud of. Last up tonight, we're going to hear from Ileana Pineda. She has experience in the cargo industry, and she'll have her own unique perspective on that. Ileana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ileana Pineda. I currently fly as a captain at a cargo airline flying the Embraer 120. My path is far from traditional. I thought I was going to go to a Part 145 university, get my rating and my degree within the 4 years, but it did not go as planned. There was a lot of left, right, down, up turns in my career path, but I'm grateful for it. So went from internships to full-time positions in the regional airline world. So a lot of management background on top of working towards getting my flight ratings. So scholarships, saving money, eating Little Caesars pizzas at time to make sure I had enough funds to get that rating and that flight time to move on forward with all my ratings and continue on to the airline world. For what I would like to share today is how to handle difficult conversation, the importance of strong mentor-mentee community, and understanding opinions do not affect your rating or your position. So with this being said, I started the PPLI as a brand new 2-crew captain on the Embraer 120. At this point in my career, I had about 1,000 hours as a first officer and a few hundred hours and as a single crew captain on the BE 99. The transition was intimidating to say the least. I knew I had gone through a thorough type rating training, experienced the cargo world nationally and internationally, and had a great support system of mentors. However, it still did not prepare everything that would head my way. Just like everyone said here, it's just not natural for everyone to see a woman pilot, let alone as a captain. Our numbers are small, which does create a barrier for us. I've had a fair share of individuals on the cargo ramp and in the cockpit who were not accustomed to this. I do want to share a specific event that did occur with me and how I responded in that certain situation. So within a few months of being released to the line as a captain, I arrived back to the base and had to speak to a manager about my aircraft. When I started the process in speaking with the manager, he made a note that I should have reached to other captains before reaching to him about the concern that I had. The normal process is just to go directly to the manager, but he said I needed to talk to someone else about it. This did take me aback. I did not expect this response from this manager, and this was he's only seen me within a few days. I'm not only the first captain that he has seen outside of the normal captains in that base, but also the first woman captain in a while that base has seen as well. So it was quite difficult to get that response, and I had to bring myself back and understand that there might be differences in between how I'm communicating to him and what I'm asking him, and what I needed from him. I had to elaborate exactly what the plan needed to happen, when it is the most appropriate time to talk to another captain, and what the result I would like to see as we move forward in the concern that I shared with him about my aircraft. A couple bullet points I wanted to break up with that conversation, because it is very difficult. No one wants to have a negative, doesn't want to be perceived negatively. No one doesn't want to experience that. And with conversations, it's happening in real time. You want to go ahead, you want to click pause and analyze what are the best options in handling this conversation. Fortunately, you cannot do that. So some of the points that I have learned, not only through the PPLI, but also with some mentors in working through having these difficult conversations. First one is take 5 seconds to breathe. We do not want to respond with the first thing that is right on top of our mind. Handle with grace. Grace is such a huge word to use when having these difficult conversations, because that means that you're handling it with a calm tone, not responding with their tone, but you're responding with their words instead. Another suggestion that I have in working towards handling these difficult conversations is create different scenarios. Specifically, I actually had this experience with my PPLI mentor where we would go through scenarios that might potentially happen for me, talking with her with some of the experiences that she had in her role as a captain in multiple airlines. It's really great to hear from mentors past experiences, because it might happen to you come later down the road. Another words of wisdom that I received when taking on this role was your type rating cannot be taken away by someone's words or actions towards you. Immediately, if someone is not responding in the way that you wanted to be responded to, it might hurt you immediately. Like, am I not right for this role? Did I not earn this position? People are not responding in the way that I want to be, that I would expect the response to be. It doesn't change anything. It does not. And there have been quite a few scenarios where, as a captain, I'm requesting certain things to happen with the crew, with the ramp crew, with dispatch, and I'm not getting the response that I needed. At the end of the day, as a captain, the plane will not leave without your okay. So nothing will happen. And with having that in mind, I just had to take a pause and respond again maybe in a different maybe in a different tone, maybe in a different way, so that the person will understand that this needs to be done. And with that being said, also, because we're such a small community, we are representing other female pilots as well. So not only do you need to challenge yourself in handling these difficult conversations, but also understanding that you do represent other female pilots in not only the cargo world, not only the corporate world, but everyone around, and just showing that as our numbers accrue, who we are and what we do in our roles stand with a lot of experience, and more and more we'll start to naturally see that we are sorry, just lost a couple words there, but we did work to earn our position and our role, and it doesn't need to take extra effort to do so. But I do see, for the most part, I have not experienced, thankfully, a negative view on being a female pilot. So it's just more of working on ourselves, working through our confidence as a female pilot, and understanding that there are some who will never agree with what we do, and we're still just going to handle it with grace, still with a smile on our face, and we're just going to continue moving on in what we enjoy doing. So at the end of the day, I just cannot recommend enough to have a strong community with the PPLI 99s, Women in Aviation. It's great to have a strong community of mentors, and then also continue with turning it back to being to mentoring others and having mentees to share your experience and help them grow in their career as well. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ileana. That was awesome. We now have time for questions if anyone has them. I would recommend typing it out in the chat, and then we can go through them in order. But for our first question, oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, it might be small, but it is somewhat of a barrier, Antonia. I liked your comment on the uniform and the scarf, because as a corporate pilot, a lot of the uniforms is a tie, and I looked like a caterer when I was wearing it. And so finally I put the scarf on, and it just changed my whole, I felt better. I got compliments, and people don't assume, some people aren't going to recognize that you're the pilot anyway. Even with the tie on, they go, hey, where's the crew? How much fuel do you want? You're like, well, I could tell you that. So I think the uniform does make a difference in how you and your confidence and how you act when you show up to the plane.
And I really liked what you said, where I looked in the mirror and that's the captain that I wanted to be. That's an incredibly inspirational thing to say. To get us started off, does anybody have any questions? But if anyone saw those barriers in the field of general aviation.
I can start off with that. So I fly GA a lot these days. And I think that there's a lot of different type of barriers that exist in GA than do in commercial, because at least in commercial aviation, and it's going to sound, I don't know how it's going to sound, but in commercial aviation, people are expected to act a certain professional way. So even if they judge you as a woman or they look down upon you as a woman, they won't upright say it, but they will say it in other ways. In GA, people don't have that filter. And they will quite literally say it to your face. There are still jokes when I fly into smaller airports about, haha, it's so funny, a woman flying a plane. Like, they'll just be plastered on the walls. So I don't know how encouraging it is for women at those airports going to flight schools there to see themselves just be the butt of the joke multiple times. And a lot of GA pilots are not very politically correct, so they won't really hold it in, and they'll tell you what they think about you being in aviation and how you're taking all the jobs and how you don't deserve to be here, and how there's way too many women these days in aviation. So the barriers are a little bit different in commercial aviation than in general aviation, I think.
I've also seen that. I'm also currently working in an airport that's more general aviation than anything else. And it's really hard when somebody says something and they're just a person. They're not your boss. They're not your coworker. It's just a person. There's nothing that anyone can do about this person choosing to be a jerk. And it's something you just have to work through, where you realize you're a professional, you are here for a reason, and even though they're choosing to be not a very good version of themselves, you have to choose to be the professional version of yourself.
Absolutely. I also sometimes see disappointment when people get assigned me as an instructor. They're like, oh, like a woman. Like I was just telling somebody that I had an experience where usually at my school we do 1 hour of ground and then 1 hour of flight. And I did a 1 hour of ground with this person. And they said, okay, so when's the instructor getting here? And I just looked around. I'm like, do you think I just go around teaching people how to do weight and balance for fun? This is just my hobby. I'm just a weight and balance enthusiast. And even though I wear the uniform of a flight instructor, so I think it's a little funny.
Yeah, I found when I was flight instructing for general aviation that just the standard of instruction, some of the older audience or older clients coming for their flight review are more used to a casual type of flying. And when I would say, hey, let's back it up with the checklist, or just was rigid on some items, they go, oh, I've never done it that way. Or, oh, I fly all the time. This is how I fly. And you don't want to tell them how to do things, but they're not changing with the times. And so that's a barrier to be up to date and safe. But you don't want to lose them or discourage them from flying or make them unsafe by not doing a flight review.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to Eileen's question here. What can be done from a broad communications and messaging perspective to reduce these societal barriers? What could companies or organizations do to help women participate in aviation?
What I see from Europe, I mean, in France, the aviation universities are really wondering how they can attract more women because they have a special course, but it's all financed by the government. So they change the concourse to maybe because the people who choose the future students, they are also stereotyped. So they will choose more men than women because I think they are more competent. So they are changing to change this. But what I see from Europe, like the airlines, they really want to hire women pilots. And in the cadets program with Air France, in a class of 10 or 12 pilots, there are three female pilots or future female pilots. And they really understand, because if we all think the same way, when we have a very complex problem, then we have only one solution. So it's very important to be inclusive and to mix the people, I guess. And I think the airline, they understood this.
Absolutely. And understanding that it's more than just messaging. You can send out the message that women are welcome in your organization, but you have to follow that up with training your other pilots and ensuring that once you do have women in your program, in your organization, that they are welcomed and that they are treated fairly.
That's the trend of role models. If you see, if the companies are show in their advertisement or whatever, then you have a woman pilots that it represents you. This is so important. I think so.
All right, Christine has a question here. Do any of you have any tips for when you're feeling overwhelmed about being, oh no, I lost it there. Do any of you have any tips for when you're feeling overwhelmed about being the only woman in the room, or when you experience those little micro comments about your gender and therefore your skills when you're at work?
Something that unfortunately happens to me at work a lot, which I thought we would be over by now, but I get dress coded sometimes, which I thought I was too old to get dress coded now. But I hear things like, you work around men, you should be careful of how you dress. Or I do carry a tote bag at work, so sometimes people will say things like, when are you going to get a real flight bag? And those things feel a little gendered a lot of the time. So the tips I have is like, and then it's gonna sound really corny, but sometimes you just have to like respond in a sassy way. I think like there's two ways to go about it. You can either like let it roll off your back and then just kind of like have a thick skin. But I think that at some point you just have to kind of give it back so that, you know, you know that they know that you're not one to be messed with. And I know it's not like the most diplomatic way, but sometimes you just have to stand your ground and you have to be like, I'm here and I'm going to be here. So you can keep these comments to yourself.
I'm going to speak on that too. So what do you have tips for what you're feeling when you're feeling overwhelmed about being the only woman in the room? I would say that for most of my career, I feel like there's a microscope on me just because I enter the space and I'm the only person that looks different. So I have been hyper aware. They call that like using a lot of your brain cells for this constant radar that's on detecting people that are looking at you. And I never got used to it. I would say like 20 years of that. And just knowing that it's happening and walking around, practicing having your shoulders back, projecting your voice and projecting confidence, being happy if that's what you feel like, if you're in a good mood, expressing yourself, if you're not in a good mood, just being yourself and being confident, you're always going to be looked at. So yeah, I guess just getting used to it, which I never did. So, and then the micro comments about your gender, those continued my entire career as well, and they still happen in my new field, which is very minority women. And I think my adaptation skill for that is to connect and learn about the person who's talking to you. Their intention is most likely to connect with you, but they're feeling really awkward about how to do that. The only women they know are their sister, their mom, their wife, right? So they're going to probably say things that they would say to those women in their life to you to try and like engage with you. And a lot of times that will sound aggressive and it'll probably be inappropriate at times. But try to see through it and see what's the intention of the person who's talking to me. Are they trying to connect with me? Are they trying to be dismissive of me? And I think that's my lens on anybody I talk to now. And it's an adaptation strategy that I gained from being the only female. So that's part of the grace part. And if they want to connect with you and you do too, then alter the conversation in that direction so that it facilitates that relationship.
Yeah, coming from a place, assuming that they're not trying to hurt you, maybe they misworded it. I find that sometimes giving them an out instead of embarrassing them straight up and saying, this is what you just said to me, instead saying, oh, I think the words you intended to say was this. They now have the opportunity to choose that and say, oh yeah, let's connect. Let's have a normal person conversation. Or say, no, my intention was just to hurt you. And now this is a conversation that we can have in that direction. But give them an out, give them an opportunity to be a good person. Alejandra has a great question. She comes from a film production background. What's the best way to stand out as a woman and person in scholarship applications with limited aviation experience? Do any of you have experience with scholarships, Ileana?
Yes. So majority of my ratings licenses were off of scholarships. So number one, I would say volunteer. Plug into your 99s, plug into Women in Aviation, go to the Women in Aviation conference. That is a huge, huge event to get a part of, to learn about internationally, nationally, because in every single state, almost every major city, even small towns, have a great aviation community, and you just never know who you're going to connect with. I would recommend, as you continue on connecting through those programs, that get plugged into, I have to say, the PPLI PPLI is a professional organization to help with professional female aviators as well. And that would help you continue on into adding not only an experience on your resume, but also gain some more experience in the aviation world and get to learn more about what is going on, because it is a completely different environment, the aviation, its own entity itself. It's such a small world. So you just never know who you're going to connect with as you get plugged into these different organizations and you start volunteering in events such as the Girls in Aviation, which are hosted all throughout the world. So I would just recommend volunteering and getting plugged in.
Awesome. We have one last question here. Diana, do you guys have any tips for making more friends and connecting with people at your local airport?
Honestly, if you're looking to make friends, everybody's also looking to make friends. So just go up. And I know it's like it's hard to just go up to someone, but really just go up to someone and be like, hey, do you want to be friends? I see you at the airport quite often. There's one more woman who works at my whole airport, and I think she's an instructor as well. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw her and I was like, hey, are you an instructor too? And she's like, yeah, I've seen you around. And I was like, I've seen you around. Let's be friends. And I think at some point you're just gonna have to pull up a kindergarten move and be like, hey, let's play together. Just say hi to everybody. It is a very individualistic type of job because sometimes you don't see the same coworkers again and again. You don't see the same, it's not like a college type of setup, especially if you're at a flight school or an airport. You don't see the same people over and over again. So if you have an opportunity to just go talk to somebody and ask them questions about themselves, people love talking about themselves. Just ask them what brought them there, and bam, you're friends.
Yeah, I found airport board meetings or your local EAA chapter. When I was in Colorado, it was the Colorado Pilots Association, and usually one of them, their meetings would be at someone's hangar, and then you ask them about their plane, and they go on this tangent, and then you're having breakfast at their house. So, they're having pancake breakfast and gatherings. So I think you just have to go to the meetings to meet people, and then you'll get connected.
I just want to agree with that with Shelby, and I wish you were still in Colorado. Hey, we could be friends. With the EAA, I started flying with the EAA when I was 21, and I got my tailwheel endorsement with them, and all men, right? All men, generally older. And I have always felt supported, and I'm in my local Colorado chapter here too, mostly all men. But consistently, when I tell them about my newest wild dream in aviation, they do not bat an eye. They're like, oh, I know so-and-so who can connect you with this and that. And then 2 hours later, they have a plan for you of how you're going to achieve your dream. And I've always felt completely supported by them. So it doesn't always have to be a group of women. I love them also.
Awesome. That brings us to the top of the hour. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you to each of our speakers for bringing your perspective and your stories and sharing so vulnerably about what your experience has been like. Hopefully it gave other women some perspective, and yeah, thank you everyone. Glenna, is there anything that you need to do to wrap up?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes, and thank you all. Those stories are so inspirational and really help us all, give us reminders. Also, your dedication and commitment to the PPLI program is wonderful to see. I just wanted to remind you, thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a good night.